All right. Good morning, everyone. We're letting people in. It is a really nice Saturday. Today is September the 17th, 2022. Our guest today is Tina Doniger, who is the Executive Director of the Community Resource Center. Good morning, Tina. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. So I've already been out. I was telling you before that my brother is a basketball coach. He's the head basketball coach at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and his team was practicing, not Roll Tide. What is it? They're the Chargers.
Oh, okay. You said University of Alabama, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, University of Alabama, Huntsville.
There you go.
Okay. It's part of the Roll Tide system, but they're the Chargers.
Okay.
So they were up today at some coach's clinic in Franklin, and he was busy yelling and screaming and trying to tell people how he was coaching. And so I didn't see him. I went and watched them practice and then came back in time to do this. So anyway, we welcome everybody on the call. Tina, I usually start by asking a very irrelevant question to start as we're letting people in, and that is, why do you have so many birdhouses behind your right shoulder? What is going on there?
Funny that you should ask. You know, the reality is I have not had the opportunity to work from home like a lot of people have. In pretty much, I haven't maybe been home 5 days working from home since March 3rd's tornado. So it's probably spring decor, if you will. Our house is a little farmhousey, chic, if you will, in decor. So I did take down Christmas trees that were probably left over from Christmas that were decor before this call. So,
the decor is, are they all birdhouses? Is that what they are?
No, it is actually a pottery, a kind of pottery called Ray Dunn. And so it is an artist out of LA that makes pottery. And so they're all, if you can see it, it says like chirp, or it says cookies or things like that. Like all of the pottery has words on it.
Very cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, so I have, we don't have a collection of things like that we do have a collection of things like that, but we do have an interesting birdhouse at our house. And it's inside. It is actually, I'm looking at another one. There's a second one right there. But it is made out of a book. So it is a birdhouse. I think it's actually behind me someplace. Well, it was. I think she moved it. But it's actually the cover of a Dr. Seuss book. And the whole thing is regarding Dr. Seuss. I think it's Green Eggs and Ham. And there's a little landing site for the birds out front, and it's a fork.
Oh, that's cute.
You know, will you eat it with a fork? I don't know, something like that. It's been a while since I read that book. I need to get back to it. But anyway, I really do like the birdhouse collection and the other stuff too. So anyway, I think we'll move on. I'll see if I can figure out where to find the birdhouse before this thing is over. All right, so Tina Doniger is our guest, the Executive Director of the Community Resource Center in Nashville. So the first question we always ask everybody is, Tina, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What have you been doing? And how did you get into this very important role of actually helping our community?
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and have been living in Nashville for 20 plus years. So I really claim this home now. And when I moved out here, I was actually in the entertainment and radio business. And so working in country radio in Portland had sent me to Nashville quite a bit, and came and visited and just really fell in love with the town and the people, and said, I think I'll move there. And so about 6 months to the day of making that decision, I was celebrating 4th of July on the riverfront, and never looked back since. And so most of my time here has been spent in media prior to nonprofit. So Dickey Brothers, which is now Cumulus Media, I believe is their name. I spent some time at the Scene. I spent some time at the Tennessean. And so I've kind of made the media marketing and sales rounds. And prior to going into nonprofit, had spent several years with Jack FM and Mix 92.9 as their marketing director. And all along really being very philanthropic, sitting on a lot of boards and participating in a lot of nonprofit events. And so that led me to Susan G. Komen. My mom is a breast cancer survivor and had been sitting on the Race for the Cure committee for several years, and ultimately began kind of my nonprofit career with them as their COO and Chief Development Officer for Middle Tennessee, or for Nashville, moving the race from downtown, right on the riverfront and through downtown area up into Demumbrian, and then ultimately to Brentwood area. And that's where I worked in the 2010 flood. And so seeing just how the community really pulled together, and, you know, our organization as a whole wasn't impacted in the flood, but we saw that neighbors just around us were needing cleaning supplies and mops and trash cans and trash can liners. And so we began in Grace's Plaza. That's where the Susan G. Komen office was. Just bring it to us, we'll get it to the Community Resource Center. And so I had been around the Community Resource Center, volunteering for Oyster Easter, and really just kind of in the weeds of that organization, and really seeing what they did in the 2010 flood and helping. I was really kind of just like, tell me more, what's going on? Where do you need help? And the Race for the Cure ultimately used a storage facility in the Gulch before the Gulch was really what it is today. And so our executive director at the CRC at that time was Catherine Mayhew. And I called her and said, a gentleman's going to call you, he's going to offer you a warehouse. You say yes and just take it. And so we gave up our Race for the Cure warehouse in order for the CRC to instantly have a space, begin collecting donations, could get a tractor trailer in there to distribute and offload and things like that. And so Catherine called shortly after the recovery and said, will you join the board and help us do what we do? And so, you know, I sat on the board for about 5 or 6 years, ultimately becoming the president of the board for a hot minute. And at that time, Catherine really decided that she wanted to retire and do some other things and some other volunteering and be a part of some other projects. And we looked around the table, and I was the only one with nonprofit experience. And so the board really said, can you step up into this? And so that was 2019. And I said, I'll give you a year. You know, I will help us get on track. I will make some changes. We will initiate some new projects and a strategic plan. But come April 2020, I'm going back to what I was doing before that. Well, all of our crystal balls were broken because, you know, March 3rd ultimately happened, and everything that has followed since then. And so it's been a wild ride, but one that has been amazing to be a part of. And we have helped so many people and worked with so many other nonprofits and city officials and city offices and things like that. And so that's kind of how we got to where we got today.
All right. So you were on the board first, and then took it on as a temporary assignment, and then we decided to have several disasters, which has kept the Community Resource Center very, very busy. So for people who don't know, tell us what is the Community Resource Center? How does it function? Yeah. And then we'll start talking about kind of how you we'll start with the disaster in March of 2020 and kind of show how that impacts. But initially, tell us, what is the Community Resource Center? What does it do? Yeah, so we've been around for 40 years, ish, give or take, or 1 or 2. It started as a list in the Tennessean. And so essentially nonprofits could say, we need a couch, or we need diapers, or we need whatever. And so they would post that list in the Tennessean and actually expect that readers of the Tennessean would follow through and
help whichever nonprofit had made a request. And then we were kind of the beginning of, before Hands on Nashville, we were the volunteer connector also. So we were doing not only goods that were needed for nonprofits, we were also telling them about really great volunteers. There's a volunteer spotlight every week. There was also a listing of places that people could volunteer. And so out of that, there have been reiterations of what the CRC did, always really connecting the needs of nonprofits to the needs or the availability of stuff from corporate and not just corporate entities, but groups and stores and things like that. And so we've had times where we had a building and nonprofits could borrow tools. We had times in which we had a computer program with Dell volunteers in which HCA was donating their computers. Dell volunteers were wiping those drives, and we were donating, or we were giving those computers back out to nonprofits. And so we've always really worked for the little guy, if you will, of nonprofits, kind of the moms and pops. And so as things have changed in Nashville, we realized that we kind of were a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And so in 2019, we did a really large strategic plan in which not only did we talk about it as a board and as the nonprofits that we work with, but we brought in the public to really say, what is your idea of what the community resource should be doing? What is your, where do we think there's a hole? And ultimately, what was kind of decided and flushed out in that set of meetings was that we really lacked a social service entity. So whether that is the government, that is nonprofit, that is someone else, really filling the hygiene space. And so we were seeing that kids in school were going without clean clothes, brushing their teeth. What does that impact look like? And so we said, we're gonna plant that flag. We are gonna become that hygiene hub of Middle Tennessee. And in 2019, we began laying the groundwork for a 2023 launch, if you will, that we had to still have the different kinds of things that were getting donated from the Cracker Barrels and the Dollar Generals and things like that. And we would get everything from, you know, they bought too much ribbon for the cash wrap at Dollar or at Cracker Barrel, to all of their sample Christmas items, to clothing, to shoes. Like, you just never knew what kinds of products were going to be donated. And so we knew that we couldn't just say, we're going to empty out the shelves and we're just going to wait until we have hygiene there. We knew we just had to make that slow turn. Well, we didn't at that point know, you know, essentially we would finish and complete a 3-year strategic plan in about the first 90 days following the tornado. That all of a sudden, the kinds of relationships that we needed to have in order to fill the needs of what really looks like a metro is 350,000 people do not have access or the ability to provide basic essentials for themselves. And so all of a sudden, you know, the Unilevers and the Dove soap and the Amazons are calling my personal cell phone in March saying, how can we help you? And what do you guys do other than disaster relief? And I was like, well, we really don't do disaster relief. We haven't had to do disaster relief in 10 years. But that's what we've spent a lot of time in the last 2.5 years doing, is disaster relief.
Okay, so I remember the days when the Tennessean would list the things, and it was usually, I think, in the Sunday paper.
Yep.
And you look at it and you go, I can provide that.
Yeah.
And then you would figure out a way to get it. So that's kind of how all this stuff started. And I do think there were opportunities to volunteer that were listed in there as well. Okay, so what?
Yeah, because Hal Cato came from Atlanta, I believe, and that was the beginning of Hands on Nashville. And so there was there was kind of this handing off of, we're going to get out of the volunteer work and just stay in the needs of nonprofits, and you can take the volunteer side of it. And that's really how Hands on Nashville began.
Okay. All right. So tell me, leading up to the disaster, obviously you've taken over and you're a resource center for the community. That's your name. And so before we got into this period of disasters, what did the community resource, what were they typically getting, and then how were they distributing it out?
Yeah. So go ahead.
And I was going to say, was there, I mean, just like the way it used to be in the Tennessean, was this is a group and they need this.
Yeah.
So how does all that match up?
It had really morphed away from that list idea. And so what we began to do is really just take on bulk product. So we may receive a tractor trailer from Dollar General, and it could be everything from candles to shoes to medicine to snow globes to whatever. And so we would work as a team of volunteers and staff and board and unpack all of that and kind of put it in. We essentially had a warehouse that looked like a Dollar General store. Like, this is your health and hygiene, this is your clothing area, this is decor. And those items would be displayed. And so we always have worked through nonprofits, and we know that nonprofits that are working in a community are trusted. They know what the needs of their community are. And so nonprofits would come in on an appointment-based system and have an hour to essentially shop and take the items that would impact their community the most. What ultimately led to a strategic plan, though, is the gift of about 10,000 snow globes. Thank you for someone that ordered them with Elvis and a Memphis, Tennessee name on it. Those snow globes just showed up on our doorstep, and we were having a board meeting the next day, and the board said, "What is all of this?" And I said, "Well, it's 10,000 snow globes." And they said, "Who's going to take them?" And I said, "Probably the dumpster, if you really want to be truthful. Like, I'm not sure that we have enough capacity in our nonprofits to take stuff that really doesn't move the needle." And that really began a hard conversation around the table about whether or not the glimmer of hope given in a gift of a snow globe is actually impacting poverty. Like, is it actually helping someone get out of a cycle? Is it helping someone through a crisis? Is it impacting them in a positive way that's making a change? And everyone around the table specifically said, "I don't think so." And at that moment, I think the light bulbs went off around the board table in the room to say, where does this community resource center fit in the impacting and fighting of poverty in Middle Tennessee? And we realized that we're really kind of phasing ourselves out with a lack of mission and a lack of clarity around that. And the board kind of had to really look in depth and say, man, how did we get here? And how are we going to change that? And that's really the catalyst for a lot of what I call CRC 2.0. And that's really where we are, is that we have left the corporate giving without knowing what that looks like, to now being very strategic in how we work with nonprofits, how we work with schools, how we work with food pantries and faith-based organizations to provide the necessities around health and hygiene for the community at large.
Okay, so two questions. First, what happened to the 10,000 snow globes with Elvis and Memphis on it?
They were at every senior center and nursing home that we could drop boxes off and run away.
All right, I got it. Okay, so I was very curious about that. But the second point would be, okay, so all of a sudden you realize that you're getting like all this stuff that really is not making the impact that you really need it to make.
Yeah.
Okay, so you all figure it out, and then you change your model. What does it do? And I'm trying to be careful, because obviously the impact of the disasters has made it very interesting for what you all do. But in terms of where you were headed prior to the disaster, what did all of a sudden you all switch to in terms of So we're not going to take 10,000 snow globes, but we're going to be more strategic in what we're doing.
Yeah, so we really started to make some headway in buying. So instead of, looking at that moment, I think we had a dismal, $20,000, $25,000 budget to buy merchandise. And so instead of us thinking about, hey, do we need to provide games or buy the toys that schools can't get for their school giving, holiday giving, we're instead going to begin buying cases of shampoo. We're instead going to be looking at what is the cost ratio of a roll of paper towels compared to the amount of usage of a spray cleaner. And so we began to slowly look for relationships in that space that we could literally say, oh, you have conditioner and you don't know where to take it, you can bring it to us. And then we had to educate our nonprofits, like, they're like, you have all this conditioner, but you don't have shampoo. And I was like, well, the conditioner was free. So we're going to take as much free product as we can. And then we're going to buy shampoo and we're going to give you as much of it as we can. But we had to say, like, conditioner is great for shaving your legs. Conditioner is great for shaving your head. Conditioner is great for moisturizing. Like, you had to just begin to educate people on what we could get free and a lot of, and then they began to see the value of that. And so when someone would say, hey, we have, not Lysol wipes, but the knockoff brand, they're expiring in 6 months, do you want those? And we'd be like, yeah, we'll take them. And so we began to kind of put those items, put the razors, put the shaving cream, put the natural hair product on the shelf, and then just watch it be picked over really quickly. And so you all of a sudden were like, oh, there's a need here. Like, we assumed there was a need, and as a board we thought there was a need, but now you were really beginning to see that need manifest inside your building.
Okay, so that it was basically I'm trying to figure out. So I mean, so you've got, all of a sudden you have all this conditioner and you start getting specific products in, and then you can start telling what is needed by what is being taken away.
Yeah.
Was there any, but I mean, was there also kind of an understanding? It's like, okay, what are some of the basic staples of what we need, and that's what we're going to go get, and we're going to put those on, watch those disappear as well.
I think you look at, what do you use on a daily basis? It's the soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, toilet paper, deodorant, baby supplies like crazy. And so whatever we could afford at that time, and if there was a sale, if there was several dollar Generals and Family Dollars in the area closed, and we would go and pay a quarter a product or 10 cents a product. And so we would clear out all of the feminine hygiene. We would clear out all of the toothpaste, and so as we were able to begin to purchase these items, you began to see, and our nonprofit partners at that time kind of filled out a list as they shopped. So there were limits, you can take 20 clothing items, but you can only take 10 shampoos. You can take, 30 pairs of shoes this week because we have an overabundance of shoes. And so as they would go through, they would check off. And so we began to kind of take all of this data that we never had around what people were taking. And you literally could see, if someone had a limit of 50 items that weren't as important, they might take 20. But if there was a limit of 5 and 10 and 7 and 2 of these items, they were maxed out every time. And so that's where all of a sudden we're like, okay, I think we're onto something, but now we really need to figure out, how do you get to the right person at an Amazon? How do you get to the right person at a Unilever? How do you get to the right person at a Dollar General? Like, how do you get to all these people in a web of lots of people that don't want to talk to you because you're a nonprofit? You don't have the Kroger money. You don't have the Publix money. You're wanting to buy, 4 or 5 cases at that time, where they're used to working with people that are buying, tractor trailers times 10 every month of the same
Right.
product. And so that's where we were stuck at, and said, okay, we know that for the next 3 years, we are going to beg, borrow, and steal all of the hygiene items we can get. And we are going to begin to develop these relationships in order to make sure that when they say, we have a tractor trailer that's been damaged and we need to have someplace to send this, or we have a product that's not right, the color is off, or the printing is wrong, that they begin to think about the CRC every time that something like that happens. And that doesn't happen overnight. Relationships like that are not made overnight. And so we knew in order for us to have a warehouse full of hygiene, we needed to make a very strategic plan on how to go about that. And that's what we were beginning to work on in the beginning of 2020.
Okay. So still not quite there yet, but I'm getting ready to get to the disaster. But so how did, so pre-disaster, how did so you were taking data, trying to figure out what it was that you needed. You were reaching out and trying to make contacts with the right group, so that instead of getting 10,000 globes of Elvis, you were getting, a Johnson's baby shampoo that was slightly off or whatever.
Yeah.
So how did the not-for-profits, in terms of, it was like they would go shopping.
Yes.
And so how does that work? So, and how do not-for-profits decide that they should be calling you and saying, hey, we need some products, can we come in? How does all that work?
We were the best kept secret in Nashville. I mean, truthfully, like there was a lot of scarcity mindset with our partners, that they didn't want to necessarily say, oh, I'm going to the community resource center and getting whatever, because they were afraid that another nonprofit would come in and take the items that they needed. And so little by little, I would say, like, oh, are there other senior centers that you work with? We would love to talk with them. And really, as long as you had a 501c3, we were willing to talk. There was a very small membership fee at that time. And so we would just essentially walk people through the warehouse and say, here's what's available to you, here's how you shop. A lot of our nonprofits at that moment, many of them had been partners for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. They had been through every reiteration of the CRC with us. And so at that time, it was a little bit of just, I don't want to tell anyone because they might come and take it. And so we were like, there's plenty there. We can get more. We'll figure it out. We'll get more. And so that's really where we kind of began this expansion, and really, took the list from the state and said, let's call every nonprofit in Davidson County. Let's call every nonprofit in Wilson County. And so at that moment, we were we had partners as far as 2 hours away that would come, just because we were the only one doing anything like this, number one. Number two, it was the only way for them to get, clothing that was brand new. Everything that's in our building was and is brand new in the last about 10 years. There is a time that we took used stuff, but it was the only opportunity that a lot of people had for brand new items. Because you have other people in the market that do used clothing, or they do used shoes or things like that, but we're the only ones doing brand new product.
Okay. So how often could a not-for-profit come in and visit?
Once a month.
Once a month. Okay.
Yeah.
And it used to be small membership fee to be a part of that. Is that right?
Yeah, small membership fee on a sliding scale based on your budget.
Okay.
So most nonprofits were paying about $150 a year, and they were probably walking away in the upwards of $12,000 to $15,000 of retail goods in a year.
It's pretty good investment. Pretty good return on
ridiculous
investment of your fee.
Yes. Yes.
So what's happening? So what's happening now? Are people still having to pay a fee, or do they have to pay a different amount?
No. So I know that you're not there to 2020 yet, but one of the first things that we decided in the midst of really the pandemic was that membership fee needed to go away. And we talked with some funders along the way and said, okay, this is going to be an impact of fill in the blank, whatever that number was. Can we make that up between you and this person and that person and that person? Because what we felt like was the pandemic was impacting everyone and everything. And it needed to not be well, I'm a member, but you're not a member. It needed to be everyone had access to the Community Resource Center. And it stayed that way. And it will continue to stay that way.
Okay. All right. So March of 2020.
Yeah.
All right. So you all are trying to get even go back to February of 2020. So everybody's, you're trying to get your strategic plan done, and you're doing all these different things. And all of a sudden, we knew that something was going on overseas. And then all of a sudden the pandemic, it finally really gets to the United States. And so what is your thinking in February of 2020? As the pandemic is heading our way and starting to, take hold in the United States, what are you all doing to get ready?
We're having some serious conversations internally on financial impact, primarily because the items that were as you looked at the news, because again, we have very little details. So we're like watching the news, you're seeing people in like gowns and gloves and face shields and masks. And those are things that we've never purchased, nor do we know like how to purchase them in the sense of like bulk quantity. And then you're thinking like hand sanitizer and soap. All of these things are uber expensive as you begin to look at them. And so for us, it's kind of like, okay, are we going to buy those items? Are we not going to buy those items? Are we going to think about it? So we're getting some quotes. We're talking to, American Paper and Twine about how do we buy in bulk? Some things like that are happening internally. Nowhere in the like planning session did we think it'd be to where it was, nor did I think we were talking in such a tiny amount of what we actually would ultimately do in the, we're like, we might need some gallons of hand sanitizer, we were buying it by 55 gallon drums by the middle of that. So I don't know that we knew the full depth nor had an inkling of what that impact would actually be on our organization. Nor did I ever think the amount of people would be working from home. Like that never thought, that didn't cross our minds in that time frame. So we're very uneducated. Is the easiest way to say it. We had no idea.
Well, I think most of us didn't have any idea.
No.
You're going like, okay, what is this and what does this mean? And we're going to send people home to work from home, and then all of a sudden it hits. So you're starting to get ready for a pandemic, and then March the 3rd hits. And so what does that mean? What did that mean for you all? Because it was an immediate impact. And then, how do you, I guess the question is for people who, were thinking back to that day, you get a phone call, and then what happens at that point? What do you all then start doing?
So first of all, let me preface that at no point in taking over the organization, other than kind of a side conversation of, we have an agreement with the city, that's about the extent of what I knew in taking over the position. We have agreement with the city, we'll help in this. And then all of a sudden I'm invited to a meeting at the EOC through OEM that's like, hey, you have to fill out this paperwork, and you're actually a responder, and here's what we need from you. And I was like, okay, what did we say we would do? What is that agreement? And so, I'm sitting in a meeting in like January, in the EOC. That's my first time there. I'm like, okay, great, whatever. Okay, we'll call you.
So just for people to know, EOC is the Emergency Operations Center. Okay. And OEM is the Office of Emergency Management. So you were so that you're in the operations center, and in January talking about, I guess, what does that mean? What does the agreement mean?
Yeah, I mean, we're having we have quarterly meetings as emergency coordinators for our organizations, and all of the people that are in the SEMP, which is the emergency plan for the city. And so we're having this meeting, and I'm like, okay, can I get a copy of that? Like I'm getting up to speed here, meeting, some of this team for the first time. And I'm like, okay. So in the next board meeting, I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I got a copy of the emergency plan. We're still in it. They expect that we're going to do the donation collection. Just put that in the back of your mind. I don't think anyone was thinking, I mean, of course we get weather, like that's, and everyone kind of watched the weather. I've never been such a weather hawk since after March 3rd now. But we live in Wilson County, and so we were narrowly missed. You kind of went one way, we live on the other side. And so as soon as that kind of passed through, the news wasn't playing catch up. Like, we didn't know the impact in Nashville because the tornado was still going through Wilson County. My family slept through it. I'm sitting here like a hawk watching the windows and what's it sound like and things like that. And I said, I think I need to sleep for a couple more hours and then I'll go to work. And I literally woke up to, I don't know, 100 missed phone calls and text messages of and it was 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm just throwing clothes on and headed out the door, pretty much landlocked because I hadn't even seen the news. So I didn't know that the tornado had gone through Donaldson and Hermitage. Our building is right off of Lebanon and Fesslers. And so that's my thoroughfare. So I'm calling my husband, I can't go to the freeway because it's blocked that way by the Kroger at Old Hickory Boulevard. I can't go this way. And he says, go through Rivergate. I think you can get through. And so backtracking through Rivergate and driving through, the glimpses of Germantown, seeing the Topgolf, net just destroyed, looking over into the east side. And along that time, I had called our board president and said, I need you to get to the office as quickly as you can. Just open the gates. I don't know what's going to happen. The mayor's making a press conference. I'm headed to the emergency management team right now. And I literally walked in and they're like, the press conference is live in an hour, be ready for donations. And I was like, okay, great. And at that point, I was the only staff member, no one else, just me and a volunteer board and some fun volunteers that like to come and pack, Cracker Barrel packages. And so I think one of my first calls was to Lori at Hands on Nashville. And I was like, we're going to need a posting. I don't know what it's, and she's like, don't call me. I'm going to call someone, they'll call you. I was like, okay. Next thing I know, I've got Hands on Nashville on board. They're making listings of volunteer opportunities. And you have to understand, we're a small organization at this moment. We don't have forklifts. We don't have pallet jacks. We don't have a truck. Anytime that we had to move something big, we went down to Penske, on Hermitage Avenue and rented a truck and went and drove it and moved our product and brought it back to the office and returned our rental. This wasn't the mode that we operated in at that level. And so I can remember the first couple of people that came through, we were let's move this and let's do this. And they were we just came to drop off some stuff, but it looks like you need some help. Can we stay and help you? And so luckily, like the first couple of people like just stayed. Then the phone was ringing off the hook as soon as the press conference. So I just started making like, I was like, do you like talking on the phone? A volunteer would come in and say, what do you need me to do? I'm like, can you talk on the phone? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, here's all the notes you need to know. And we just put them in an office and say, answer the phone when it rings. And so quickly we just realized, oh my gosh, we're about to be like overtaken by stuff and people and whatever. And one of the first people to walk through the door was Bowman Richards, and he owns Richards and Richards. And he said, you're gonna need some boxes. We're like getting out of the storage business. We're just gonna do shredding. I'm gonna bring you some boxes. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. He's like, can you send a truck over to get them? And I said, we don't have a truck. And he said, I'll send my guys. And I was like, okay. So he sends the guys, and now we have boxes. And then I called him back and I was like, how am I going to move these boxes? And he goes, I'm bringing you a pallet, a box load of pallets, a truckload of pallets. And so little by little, you look at, like, I have photos of like the first couple of hours of this disaster, and we're like literally pushing on water on a push cart, not knowing that tractor trailers of water would come in the next day, that we were dealing with, filling a box of stuff, and we would ultimately move to a pretty intelligent setup in our parking lot of a tented, we had a tented drive-through donation center with volunteers walking the streets of Omohundro all the way out to Lebanon Road to tell people how to stay in their cars and how to make the donations. We had an army of volunteers that if you showed up more than once, you got a blue name tag and kind of were put in charge of a specific area that you knew how to do it. And so, and all along, like the beginning of this was literally Nashvillians and people from Franklin and people from wherever that just said, I'm going to Target right now and I'm going to buy whatever you say. And so we began just to post stuff on our website and really our Facebook and social media, Instagram, of just like, as the needs came from the city telling us like, we're going to need debris removal. And I'm like, some rakes and some shovels, like, no, like hundreds of rakes and hundreds of shovels. And so that's just really, it's trial by fire. And little by little, you just had these people show up and walk through your door. We had a Superior Industrial Products came and just brought us forklifts. And he was like, here's the key. And I said, who's going to drive them? And he said, well, you are. And I said, I don't know how to drive that. And they left their sales team for a week. And so literally, like, a sales guy would come in the morning, he would leave and go do sales calls. Another sales guy would come in the afternoon. And we had a FedEx driver that was delivering packages to us. And so she'd park her truck, and for the hour of her lunch, she would eat her lunch on the forklift and move product for us, and then be like, okay, my hour's up, I got to go back to my route. Amazon had just taken our wish list and populated it everywhere. So on an average, we were getting in the upwards of about 1,000 packages in the morning and 1,000 packages in the afternoon. Like, so we just had this army of volunteers that began to show up every day. And I think, like, corporationally, they saw that neighborhoods had been just annihilated, and people needed to, like, either people needed to recover or they needed to help in order to recover. And so you had organizations like Lifeway and Dollar General and like people that just, like Piedmont Gas, same with them. Like, these employees just said, our boss said, come volunteer today with you guys. And they might stay a week, and it's pretty crazy when I look at, that's when I met Chief Swan for the first day, was like, first time was day 2 of the disaster. And he looked at me and was like, good job. He's probably thinking we were crazy. Like, we didn't know, we're just a nonprofit trying to help, And now he, pops in and he's like, oh, this is a well-oiled machine, like you've learned how to do this. And so that tornado, like the first month of that was just crazy. But every day got better. And we learned how to move stuff. We learned how to package stuff. We learned how to do all of that. And I think we thought like, oh, we'll only have to do this now. We'll just only have to figure out how to do this, not knowing we would do it again and again and again over the course of 2 years.
So how did you get, I mean, after, all the stuff is coming in and people are volunteering and helping and giving you forklifts and all other kinds of stuff. So you've got all this stuff coming in. How did you get it out to people that needed it?
So really quickly, really up until we kind of call April 13th, like D-Day. That's really when COVID really hit Nashville. And so we had some amazing churches and some amazing partners that really just opened their doors and said, we're going to run distribution. So we had Han volunteers, checking people in and checking people out, helping them get there. And so we began just this really organized way of, you call us, you tell us what the restock is. And so we had a set of Han teams that were AmeriCorps members, and they would know, hey, we're running low on size 3 diapers. We need more canned food. We are great on dental, but we really could use some denture cream or whatever the thing is. And so they would call that in, and then they would leave and drive to the CRC. And we had a whole team on site that would take that order. And the volunteer that would kind of be talking to people would say, the next truck coming in is the Han order. And it looked like ants on a picnic. Like someone was yelling, 14 packages of toilet paper, go find 5 boxes of toothpaste, go get, and boxes are like boxes, they're not like boxes, they're big, giant, hundreds of packages. And so we just had this network of places that were distributing. And then we were uncovering stuff along the way. Like, we really didn't know the impact of Hermitage Donaldson. Really, the city didn't know the impact of Hermitage Donaldson for a couple of days. And all of a sudden, we're getting a phone call from the community of chiefs of 2 Rivers. And she's like, I've got a whole apartment complex of these kids that have been impacted. What can you do? And I'm like, come on. And we began to just work with these kind of unsung heroes. People that knew their community, churches that knew who was being impacted, and began to just really funnel product really right down into the locations of impact. There's a story, one of the stories is that one of the Han employees was impacted and literally turned her whole front yard and the whole house into just whatever her neighbors needed. And so if you came and got a rake, you returned the rake back to her front yard. And so we just have stories of this. We found, neighborhood captains that really knew the neighbors and said, oh my gosh, we haven't seen Miss Sally. We're going to go knock on her door. And she was terrified to come out, and had damage to her house, but she was worried if she came out of the house that someone might go in and rob her, whatever the case might be. And so we'd get a phone call from a really I know that this person who knows this person who knows, like, you can trust them. Can they call you? Then I'm like, yes, and so we really just began to find people that were loving their community. And then it really began to like, okay, we're going to do door to door in this neighborhood. And so we would load up and package and do what needed to be done so that almost whatever need might be covered in that, people were going door to door and being able to cover that with their neighbors, whether it was food from Second Harvest or, materials from us or whatever the case might be.
What's there? So could individuals call you at that point? I mean, I know you were saying individuals on behalf of a neighborhood, but
we
I
were
mean,
really,
yeah.
we were really trying to funnel individuals to distribution sites. At one point, the donation line for us was wrapped all the way out into Lebanon Road. So we didn't want to have, Sally, you need help, just get in line and we'll help you. They'd be sitting there for hours trying to get into the area. And so instead we would say, what part of the neighborhood are you in? We're here. Okay, Donaldson, go here. This place, go there. And then, April happened and COVID really got activated. And so we just had to really work with our partners on, how are you going to still work with us? Are you closing down? How is this shifting? And that's really about the time that kind of case management and really working with survivors and the organizations that were going to begin to work long-term really came to the forefront. And that's where, instead of individuals calling us, we would send them through a case manager. A case manager would make a request for them, and then we would begin to fulfill those needs on an individual basis, but through a vetted program, and not just, I live here. We didn't know if they live there or not. So
did you ever get the chance early on to go out to Hermitage, Donaldson, and see what happened? Because I think you were right. With everything going on, a lot of the focus initially was probably more in terms of North Nashville and East Nashville. But I went out to Hermitage, Donaldson later that week, and I was amazed at what had happened. There were houses almost completely leveled, if not leveled. And then I went out to the school out there. I guess it was Donaldson Christian.
Yeah.
And, we were very lucky in terms of people being hurt.
Very much so. I mean, the fact that this didn't come in a daytime, and talking about Metro, we live in Wilson County. We lost 2 full schools in Wilson County, a middle school and an elementary school. So imagine if those had been full of kids. So my husband says I lived in a really small bubble for the first week because I couldn't get down Lebanon Road. In the number, I think it was about 100 telephone poles had been snapped. So that, until that was free. And so I literally would drive Rivergate into town, and then I would take the freeway home. And so I just really kind of lived in this really protected bubble. And so the first Sunday, we just said, we are not going to open until noon. And we go to church in Mount Juliet, and I cried all the way to church because I had no idea what had happened to Wilson County. No idea. Like we had taken stuff to Wilson County. We had begun to do some work there, but had not driven that space. And I just cried as soon as I saw the first damage, just boohooed all the way there. And then as soon as Lebanon Road really was opened, I just cried to work every day. And it was about being tired. It was about neighborhoods being just destroyed. But I think at the same time, it is a lot of thankfulness that it wasn't during the day. It wasn't at a full population. And certainly, we talk about Davidson County numbers, but those swell Monday through Friday as people come into work, and think about the Germantown and East Nashville and those places. It could have been so much worse. But the other thing that I was so thankful about is that I was where I was doing what I was doing. I could have walked away at the end of my, year time and been like, peace out, I did my work. And instead, I think I was really led to be there with the team that we had. And for me, I look at our ability to do what we do really is a giant event. I look at it like, how do we get volunteers in? How do we get donations in? How do we get them out? And how fast can we churn product to help those that need help? And so this is a long-term recovery. This isn't, you don't get impacted by a tornado and then instantly, like, I'm recovered, it's great. Like, it's really about, your initial needs are health and hygiene. Then it goes into some clothing and how do we get kids back into school and how do we get parents back to work? And then it's like, do you need to stay in a hotel for a month while we begin to work on your house? But how do we begin to walk with these people? And we're 2 years out and we still are building houses. We're still getting, I just paid a site surveyor bill for a survivor just this week, because we're still trying to get, their house back to where it needs to be. And they're not going to be able to recover where they lived, and they're going to need to do something different. Like, and so working with this group of VOAD and nonprofits, I see Terry Rapoon from Westminster Home Connection on the call, like, working with all of these people that our paths wouldn't have necessarily crossed, except we got to all come together and help people recover together.
Okay, so we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. So where do we go from here? I haven't finished with my question from the disaster, but where do we go from here so that we are in a much better position for any disaster that comes up? But also, hopefully we don't have disasters for a while. We're still cleaning up from the last several. But what are you all doing now? And then how are you preparing for the next one?
Yeah, I think that's really kind of a 2-part answer. I'll tell you, we only took the month of March off, March 2020, of working with our nonprofit partners. And so we knew right off the bat, like, we got to get them back up and running and getting stuff. We have really shifted kind of our model. We now have some external hygiene pantries that are in schools and nonprofits in Middle Tennessee. We cover 7 counties. We've got representation in 5 of those 7 currently. And so we know that if a crisis is happening or a disaster happens, your first thing you need to lead with is hygiene, health and hygiene, number 1. So that's allowed us to really already begin to get into the community and serve them. The other side of it is Davidson County VOAD is alive and well and kicking. And we're really working on a network of support if a disaster were to hit us. And it's not if it will, it's when. We really look at this as we've got some blue skies right now, and we're able to do a lot of planning. So we've begun working on technology so that we have one location that survivors can get entered into a system if they are impacted by the next disaster. We're beginning to work on a networking of organizations that are willing to be distribution sites. I know Han and our volunteer team on VOAD is working on locations that we can set up as volunteer hubs, and so that all volunteers go to one place instead of spontaneously, ending up in Germantown with a chainsaw. And so the plan is the more that we can plan now, and the more that we can educate our city officials and our city council and our volunteers and our donors and all of these things, that we can tell them there is a plan, and this is how, this is the conduit in which the plan gets started and gets worked, the more likely that we're able to respond in a much more organized fashion and be able to provide the needs of the survivors. And I think that is top of mind for every one of our nonprofits that are part of VOAD. I think the other side of it is, we're not paid by the city. All of this is volunteer. There's no money that gets given to us by the city for the Community Resource Center or HAN or any of those. And so we have to keep running our businesses and keeping our nonprofits and the programs that we have going on, but at the same time know that it's really important to respond to our neighbors in need.
Amazing work. You have done an incredible job during all these disasters and continue to do it. Here's what the last question would be. So if people want to help, what's the best way to do it? They can donate, or if they, you know, I don't want to bring over one thing of shampoo and say here, but
Yeah.
I mean, how do we help you do what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, you know, cash is king. I always say that because our buying power is about $18 to your dollar. So always, you know, crcmidtn.org or CRC Nashville, both of those head to the same place. We're able to, you know, always take volunteers. And so if you aren't able to give financially, you are able to give your time and talent. And then, of course, we always are looking for those groups that do want to do a drive. And we call those dignity drives. Our biggest need is around shampoo and deodorant. That is the most expensive items, specifically with inflation right now. So anytime that someone brings in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, it's great. And then we also have a really robust Amazon wish list on our website, right on the homepage. And so even if you are, you know, shopping from your couch, or you're scrolling through Facebook or whatever, you can shop really easy on Amazon and send directly to us. So, you know, I thank you for having us on, and certainly there's a lot of amazing things that are going on the CRC. We'd love to have people come and visit. So reach out to us, come in, take a warehouse tour, and learn more about what we're doing.
Tina, thank you. Tina Doniger, Executive Director of Community Resource Center. This has been really, really amazing. So thank you. For everybody, we're off next week, but we'll be back on in 2 weeks. Tell your friends, neighbors, people you know about the Community Resource Center, and tell them how to get engaged and involved. So Tina, thank you. Everybody have a great weekend, a safe week ahead, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.